In this demonstration, I will ensure that you understand how files are generated behind the scenes in a WPF project. Let's switch to Visual Studio. Here I've opened the main window SAML file of our WPF project. Before we look at the generated files, I want to show you how you can access this button instance from the code behind file. To do this, you give this button a name with the xName attribute. Let's call it btn add customer. Now let's go to the Solution Explorer and let's open the code behind file of the main window. Here in the Click Event Handler, I don't want to show a message box. Instead, let's change the content of the button. Now you can access the button with a name that you gave it in SAML. Let's set its content property here to customer edit. Now let's run the application and let's see this in action. Let's click here on the button and now you see the adjusted text. Great, now let's close this window again. Now when you look here at this main window class, you can see two things. First, there is this btn add customer field of type button that is not defined here in this file. Next, there is this call of the initialized component method in the constructor, and that initialized component method is also not defined in the main window class in this file here. But actually, the C# compiler needs this btn add customer field and also this initialized component method to compile this main window class. So, somewhere in the project, these members must be defined. When you look at the class definition, you can see it has the partial keyword. This means that the class definition can be split across several files. And this is what is actually the case in this project. Another C# file is generated behind the scenes from the SAML document. So when you go to the Solution Explorer and when you look at the properties of this C# file, let's do this, you can see the build action here is C# compiler. The C# compiler processes that C# file. When you look at the properties of the SAML file, you can see the build action is page. This means that behind the scenes, a SAML processor is processing the SAML document when you build the project, even when you just type code in Visual Studio. So, from that SAML document, C# code is generated in addition. When you open the SAML document, you can see on the root element the X-class attribute, which is set here to Wired Brain Coffee Customers App main window. This is actually the class name that is used for the generated file. And it is exactly the class name that you find here in the code behind file. We have here the namespace Wired Brain Coffee Customers App and the class main window. Now let's look at the generated code. So let's right-click here the initialized component method and let's select Go to Definition. Now you can see a main window GICS file opened up. Let's go again to the Solution Explorer to see where this file is actually located. First, I click here on this little button from the Solution Explorer's toolbar to show all the files. Next, I click on this button to sync the active document, which is this generated file. Let's click on it, and now you can see you are here in the Object Debug folder of the project, and here is this main window GICS file that gets generated from the SAML document. When I scroll up in this file, you can see it has the namespace Wired Brain Coffee Customers App and the class is main window. It is also a partial class definition here, which means this file and the code behind file define together the main window class. Now I want to show you something. Let's grab the SAML document and let's split it here to the left side. Now on the root element of this document, let's change here on the X-class attribute main window to main win. Now I save this and you can see that the class name in the generated file also changed to main win. This means that this generated partial class does not match anymore the partial class of the code behind file. So when you look at the code behind file, you see initialized component is not found anymore, and also the btn add customer field is not found anymore, because we have here a partial class main window. Now let's go again to the generated file and let's change in the SAML document the class name again to main window, and let's save this. Now you see it changed here again in the generated file to main window, and now when you look at the code behind file, everything is fine again. Because in this generated file, you can see actually here the field for the button that gets generated from the SAML document. So here is this btn add customer field, which is in this partial main window class, which means you can just access it from the code behind file, because this is actually the same main window class, just in a different file with a partial class definition. Then when you look at the rest of the code, you see here this initialized component method, which is responsible to load the elements defined in the SAML document into the window object. And then you see down here a connect method that initializes the btn add customer field with a button from SAML, and here also the event handler for the click event is installed. Now let's go again to the Solution Explorer and let's sync again with the active document. Beside the GICS file, you see here also a GCS file. Both contain pretty much the same content, as they are actually like two different versions of the same file. Then you see here a BAML document, which is a binary representation of the SAML document that is compiled into your assembly. This is done to save a bit of space, as binary is more compact than SAML. You can see here also a generated file for the application object. So when you actually look at the app SAML file, you can see it has also here an X-class attribute. When you right-click this file and when you look at the properties, you can see the build action here is not page, it is application definition. That build action creates actually the main method in the generated file. So let's also look at this one. Let's open here the app.gics file and let's scroll down in this file. And you can see here at the bottom the generated main method that creates and runs the app object. Alright, so far to the generated files behind the scenes. When you work with WPF, you just use the SAML document and the code behind file. And in simple words, the X-class attribute is the connection from your SAML document to the code behind file. Now let's wrap up what you have learned in this module.